Night of Terror Flight, 800th Ill. 801, the Guam crash that changed aviation forever. On the night of August 6, 1997, the quiet island of Guam was rocked by one of the most devastating aviation disasters in the Pacific. Korean Air Flight 801, a regularly scheduled passenger flight from Seoul, South Korea, to Guam, was nearing the end of its journey. On board the Boeing 747-300 were 254 people, including vacationers, business travelers, families, and the flight crew. As the aircraft approached Antonio B. 1 Pat International Airport in the early hours of the morning, low clouds and darkness blanketed the island. Within moments, the flight would end in catastrophe. The crash of Flight 801 would not only claim the lives of 228 people, but would also trigger an international investigation that exposed alarming gaps in training, communication, and safety technology that shocked the aviation world. Flight 801 departed from Seoul at approximately 8 p.m. local time. The captain, a seasoned pilot with over 9,000 flight hours, was at the controls alongside his first officer and flight engineer. The flight was uneventful until the final approach. Scheduled to land in Guam around 1:40 a.m., the aircraft was preparing to descend amid heavy rain and limited visibility caused by passing thunderstorms. Despite the poor weather, the crew proceeded with the approach to runway 6L, relying heavily on the aircraft's instruments due to the lack of visual reference outside the cockpit. Unbeknownst to the crew, however, a critical piece of ground-based navigation equipment, the minimum safe altitude warning system, was inoperative at the time. This system would have alerted air traffic controllers if the aircraft descended below a safe altitude. Meanwhile, the aircraft's onboard systems were also a source of confusion. The crew misunderstood key information from their navigation instruments and mistakenly believed they were on a proper descent path, even though they were far too low and several miles from the runway. As the aircraft descended below 500 feet, it was flying over a densely forested hillside on Nimitz Hill, just south of the airport. Despite several automated warnings from the cockpit's ground proximity warning system, including the chilling sink rate and pull-up alerts, the crew did not react in time. At approximately 1:42 a.m., the massive aircraft slammed into the hillside at high speed. The impact was catastrophic, breaking the jet into several pieces and igniting a massive fire fueled by the aircraft's fuel tanks. Rescue efforts were launched quickly, but the terrain and weather made access to the crash site extremely difficult. Emergency crews and local volunteers bravely navigated the jungle and steep terrain, pulling survivors from the wreckage. Tragically, 228 people perished, including many children and crew members. Only 26 passengers and 1 crew member survived the crash, many with serious injuries. The island of Guam, known for its natural beauty and hospitality, suddenly became the focus of worldwide attention and mourning. The crash of Flight 801 sent shockwaves through South Korea, the United States, and the global aviation community. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, of the United States immediately began a detailed investigation, working alongside South Korean authorities and Boeing. Over the following months, investigators pieced together flight data, cockpit voice recordings, and testimonies from survivors and air traffic controllers to understand how such an experienced crew could make such a tragic error. The findings of the investigation were disturbing and far-reaching. The NTSB concluded that the primary cause of the accident was pilot error. The captain, despite his years of experience, had misinterpreted the approach profile and descended below the minimum descent altitude without having the runway in sight. Contributing factors included fatigue, poor communication among the flight crew, and inadequate adherence to standard operating procedures. Compounding these issues, the inoperative safety equipment at the airport was found to be a serious oversight by the Federal Aviation Administration. Another shocking revelation was the ineffective crew resource management on board Flight 801. The first officer and flight engineer noticed irregularities and voiced concerns during the descent, but the captain overruled them or ignored the warnings. This highlighted the dangerous cockpit culture in which subordinate crew members felt hesitant to challenge their superior. A problem identified in previous air disasters as well. In the wake of the crash, there were immediate and long-term changes in aviation practices. Korean Air underwent a comprehensive overhaul of its training, safety protocols, and management culture. International regulators, led by the FAA and ICAO, pushed for stricter adherence to crew resource management principles and better fatigue management for flight crews. Improvements were also made in airport safety infrastructure, ensuring that systems like the minimum safe altitude warning would no longer be taken offline without strict protocols and backup systems. Perhaps one of the most lasting impacts of the tragedy was the way it transformed Korean Air itself. Once plagued by a poor safety record, the airline took drastic steps to rebuild its reputation, hiring foreign safety consultants, restructuring its pilot training, and replacing much of its leadership. Over the next 2 decades, Korean Air would rise to become one of the safest and most respected international carriers, a transformation born out of the ashes of Flight 801. Families of the victims were left with immense grief and many questions. In both South Korea and Guam, memorials were built to honor the lives lost. Each year, remembrance ceremonies are held at Nimitz Hill, where the crash occurred. Survivors and relatives of the victims gather to reflect on the tragedy and the loved ones they lost, preserving the memory of what happened and ensuring that their legacy continues to influence aviation safety worldwide. The story of Flight 801 is one of heartbreak, mistakes, and painful lessons. It reminds us that even the most routine flight can be vulnerable to a series of small errors that build into a disaster. It also underscores the importance of vigilance, teamwork, and continual improvement in aviation. While the crash was a tragedy, the changes it inspired have undoubtedly saved lives and helped prevent future accidents. Years later, pilots continue to study the Flight 801 tragedy during training as an example of how things can go wrong when procedures are not followed and communication breaks down in the cockpit. Air traffic controllers and airport authorities also use the case as a lesson in maintaining critical safety equipment and ensuring clear communication with incoming flights. The aviation world remembers Flight 801 not just as a loss, but as a catalyst for progress. Though time has passed, the memories of those who perished in the crash remain etched in the hearts of their families and the people of Guam. Their legacy lives on in the safety measures that protect every passenger who boards a flight today. As airplanes continue to soar through the skies with greater safety than ever before, the story of Flight 801 will always be a somber reminder of what can happen when the system fails, and why every link in the chain of aviation safety matters.